Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Cassie Riva. I'm the Assistant Events Manager at an Unlikely Story bookstore in Plainville, Massachusetts. Before we start, here's a few technical tips. If you lose audio or visual during the event, just refresh your page and that should fix it. We're also streaming on an Unlikely Stories Facebook page, so you can watch the event there. If you'd like to purchase the author's books, click the green button below or the link above if you're watching on Facebook. And when you order Stephen or Rachel's books, you're going to receive a signed book plate while supplies last. And we saw Paul last week, so we have signed copies of all of his books right now. It is my pleasure to welcome best-selling authors Stephen Graham Jones, Rachel Harrison, and Paul Tremblay to our virtual stage tonight for our annual horror panel. This is always one of my favorite events of the year. I tried to make the room a little spooky. Stephen Graham Jones is the New York Times best-selling author of The Only Good Indians. He's won the Jesse Jones Award for Best Work of Fiction from the Texas Institute of Letters, the Independent Publishers Award for Multicultural Fiction, a Bram Stoker Award, 4 This Is Horror Awards, and has been a finalist for the Shirley Jackson Award and the World Fantasy Award. He is a professor of English at the University of Colorado Boulder. His newest book, My Heart is a Chainsaw, is Shirley Jackson Meets Friday the 13th. A Publisher's Weekly Star Review said horror fans will be blown away by this audacious extravaganza. It's such a powerful book. Rachel Harrison was born and raised in New Jersey. She received her bachelor's in writing for film and television from Emerson College. After graduating, she worked on TV game shows, in publishing, and for a big bank. She lives in Western New York with her husband and their cat/overlord. Her book, The Return, is a staff favorite, and her new book, CACKLE, is this not the most gorgeous cover you've ever seen, is a darkly funny, frightening novel about a young woman learning how to take what she wants from a witch who may be too good to be true. Pop Sugar said it's funny as it is frightening. CACKLE by Rachel Harrison is the perfect book to cuddle up with on a crisp fall night. Paul Tremblay has won the Bram Stoker Award, British Fantasy Award, and Massachusetts Book Award, and is the author of Growing Things, The Cabin at the End of the World, Disappearance at Devil's Rock, A Head Full of Ghosts, and the crime novels The Little Sleep and No Sleep Till Wonderland. His essays and short fiction have appeared in the Los Angeles Times, Entertainment Weekly Online, and numerous years' best anthologies. He has a master's degree in mathematics and lives right in Stoughton. And his new book, Survivor Song, once again demonstrates Paul's mastery in this chilling and all too plausible novel that will leave readers racing through the pages and shaking them to their core. There's actually a blurb right on the cover from the Stephen King that says absolutely riveting. So good. Interviewing these authors tonight is our unlikely bookseller and horror buff, Bill Carl. Bill, I'm going to let you take it away. I'm going to find you. Hi, everyone.
Hi. Oh, am I in yet? There I am. Hey, everybody. So, yes, this is easily my favorite time of the year. Halloween is like the greatest holiday that's ever been created. I mean, if you have an entire holiday based around candy, horror movies, and dressing up, what's not to love? So one thing I really love is going. One thing I love every time this time of year is I try to read only horror and thriller fiction during the month of October, and I try to watch 50 horror movies during the month, which working full time is not always easy, but I'm at 39, so I might just make it this year because Halloween Day you can watch like 5 in a row that night. But I'm so excited to have these authors here with us because I've read all the books and I've read all their old books, and it's just an amazing group that we have here. And I'd like to start with the authors. I mean, I can tell people what these books are about, and I do it every day in the store, but I would like the authors in their own words to tell us what it's about. And we're going to go ahead and start with Rachel. So if you can tell us about this book, why do we read it?
Why do we read it?
Other than be terrified.
So Cackle is a wry contemporary witch book, and it's been described as cozy horror. So if you want a little bit of a respite from the world, it's a good one to dive into and curl up with on a October evening. Am I trying to sell the book?
No, go ahead and tell us about the plot and what it's about.
So it's about Annie, who just turned 30 and was dumped by her longtime boyfriend. And so she moves upstate and gets a new teaching job. And she's trying to be optimistic, but she's having kind of a rough time until she meets Sophie, who is this mysterious woman who lives in town, who kind of takes Annie under her wing and who may or may not be a witch, and either a good one or a bad one.
All righty. And we'll move on to Paul Tremblay and Survivor Song. Tell us about this one.
Yeah, this one is unlike Rachel's book. It's not if you're looking for an escape. If it's you really want to lean into what we're living through right now, this is the book for you. So Survivor Song is about an outbreak of a super rabies virus in our Massachusetts local area. It's not a pandemic, even though it's hard not to read the book and think it's a worldwide pandemic. But the book really it's almost told over real time, 4 to 6 hours, during this outbreak that's relatively new. Natalie is in her mid-30s and she's pregnant with her 8.5 months pregnant with her first child. She and her husband are attacked by an infected rabid person. This isn't really much of a spoiler because it happens in the first chapter. And so Natalie then goes to her best friend, Romola, Dr. Romola Sherman, or Rams as she calls her, who's a pediatrician. It's just basically those two women looking for, help for Natalie because she's been bitten. And they don't know if she's infected or, if the baby will be infected. And, it's their sort of harrowing journey over 4 to 6 hours. Plus rabid foxes.
It's really interesting too, because I read the book and you totally just, you pretty much destroy like Norwood Hospital. And then I had an appointment at Norwood Hospital and we went there for an examination that I had to go get an MRI, and it was destroyed that night by like a water flood. It was the whole hospital. It was insane.
Right. To be fair, I destroyed it with fire and zombies. I did not destroy it with a giant flood. So yeah, that's why
every biblical reference we can get there.
Right.
Let's move on to Stephen Graham Jones and My Heart is a Chainsaw.
Oh,
Intriguing title.
Thank you. When Paul was describing his, I realized you can emphasize it differently. You can say it's about a super rabies virus, and then we're like happy,
Yeah.
It's the best rabies virus. My Heart is a Chainsaw is a slasher. It's Jason, Michael, Freddy, Ghostface, all them dudes who like to, kill groups of campers, groups of anybody they stumble into. There's a girl in town, Jade Daniels. I say in town, it's Proof Rock. It's 8,000 feet up the mountain in Idaho. Jade Daniels, who is an outcast in her family, her school, her community, and she insulates herself with slashers and slasher trivia, and she prays to Craven and Carpenter to send a slasher to her town to dispense some justice because she feels a distinct lack of it in her life. And she gets her wish and kind of wishes she hadn't made that wish.
Okay. So, Stephen, we're going to continue with you. You play with a lot of slasher tropes in the book, and you actually have the title of many, many, many slashers. I mean, so you worked in even like, for goodness sake, Sweet 16 or something, but you didn't work in one of my favorites that I could find at least, Hide and Go Shriek, which should have been in there someplace. Which if you've not seen, you need to watch it. It's totally insane. So can anybody read this book, even if they're not really familiar with all the slasher tropes?
I think so. And even if, of course I'm going to say yes, I'm not going to say no. Right. but Jade, between the chapters, we have privileged access to her extra credit papers. Her history teacher lets her write for her Idaho State history course. And her extra credit papers are all about the slasher, these series of slasher 101 papers where she lays out all the conventions and characters and different dynamics that the slasher is known for. So I think, if you don't know the slasher, I think Jade will educate you on the slasher such that you can figure things out. Although I can't guarantee there won't be spoilers. If somebody's been waiting all these years to watch Halloween, then I might spoil a thing or two,
This might not be the book to start with if you've not even seen Halloween yet, but it's so good. So I love this book. And we're going to go backwards and go with Paul. you started to say about the pandemic and the similarities between your book and what's going on, and I almost didn't think you went far enough in some cases with the way people reacted. I mean, were you surprised by anything after you finished? I mean, the book was edited and ready when the pandemic was hitting, right?
Oh yeah, the book was. I turned in my copy edits like November 2nd of 2019. So, there were review copies in late December, January 2020. So before any of it was out there.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, surprised by everything, obviously, but like, I don't know. At the same time, it was always like a matter of when, not if, we were gonna, go through a pandemic. All the medical stuff that seems relevant to what we're doing was because my sister, who's a nurse in one of the biggest hospitals in Boston, did research with me. So that was really sort of a joy to get to work with her. So she was the one that brought up the mention, they wouldn't give us proper PPE. Now, I remember distinctly taking a section of texts between my sister and her coworkers that I put like right into the book, essentially. And thinking as I was putting in there, it's like, do I have to explain PPE like one time, a couple times, just let it ride? And, and now it's, no, you don't have to explain it at all. But yeah, no, if anything, like when it came to sort of like the social extrapolations that are in the book, like, yeah, I mean, within the book, there's a set of people that have conspiracy theories about the virus. I obviously way underestimated how mainstream that would become, similarly with anti-vaccination, and definitely way underestimated. I said in the book that Trump's federal response to such a thing would be awful. And I, again, underestimated, how awful it would be.
Thank you. Rachel, so in your book, actually in both of your books, they feature very strong relationships between women. And it's something that's starting to happen. Actually, all three books that are featured here have a female protagonist. So do you think the genre is changing its attitude towards women, or is this something that's been there that we're just like digging through the surface of?
I think it's always been there, but I think there are newer voices and people are maybe working a little bit harder to portray women with a little bit more dimension and nuance. So I think it's moving in an exciting direction, and yeah, I love to see a female protagonist, but I think it should be, even playing field.
I think it's fantastic because it's not just playing the victim. Both of your books, it's not at all that way. Especially Cackle, I feel like is I mean, you root for her so strongly, and actually, I rooted for both of them, but I'm that kind of guy. So it was, but it was just fascinating, and we're starting to see, I think, a lot of this happening in the horror genre in the last few years. People who would have been marginalized in the past are now becoming the protagonists. And so you're seeing a lot more women and a lot more LGBTQ plus people and minorities. And it's fascinating to me. Do you guys have opinions on what's going on out there? Or are we actually growing up as a country? Because sometimes it doesn't feel that way. Or maybe as a genre.
Well, I feel like, I don't know, Get Out and Victor Laval's Ballad of Black Tom kind of kicked the door open for a lot of people who hadn't been on the scene to pile through the door and start writing stuff, and so we have been seeing more of it in the last probably 5 years.
Okay. But your books have always, at least the last few, have dealt right with your Native American subculture and mongrels, even that comes to mind.
Yep.
But, which we have in the store, by the way.
All right. Thank you.
If you haven't read it, it's terrific. Werewolf. But any opinions? Anybody else? Or
I would just say briefly, like, to the first question, like, is the country getting better? I don't know. I mean, I think part of our country is certainly getting better. I mean, if we sort of restrict it to the horror genre, which, for decades had a, well-earned, reputation for being misogynistic, homophobic, racist, etc. And I do think, we've clearly gotten a lot better in the last, certainly within the last like 5 to 10 years, but, maybe even this, slow incremental getting better into the 21st century. And, I think it's no secret that now that you're getting to see more own voices represented and published, you're seeing, this amazing wide variety of what the genre can do. And it's more than exciting. It's, I don't know, like I've always argued, as I'm sure everybody here has, that, horror is, I don't know, it's my favorite genre for a reason, because I think, what you can do with it is boundless. And, it's not just for the weirdos. I think there are lessons that everybody can and should take from, the best of our genre.
Yeah. Or maybe everybody's a weirdo,
Yeah, that's true. Maybe that's probably the truer part of it. Yeah.
We're all weirdos on this bus. Any ideas, Rachel, or?
Just echoing what they said. I mean, I think as a genre specifically, a lot of exciting things are happening in horror right now. And I think it's because we're spoiled with so many amazing voices. And I think horror fans are really ready and willing and excited to have new content and new voices, and willing to try new things and new stories and go down new paths. So I think everyone asks, well, why is the horror genre thriving right now? And I think that's why.
So it is definitely, there is a renaissance going on in horror fiction. And it seems to happen every maybe 20 years or so, like when political issues get put to the forefront. You look at the late 60s, early 70s, when you had William Peter Blatty and Ira Levin, and then, The Exorcist and Thomas Tryon with all of his books. And then you see it again in the 80s when it's sort of more of a splattery kind of feel, and then it's happening again now. Does anybody have ideas there, or is it just the political atmosphere of the country that affects this, or is it other things?
Oh, I think it is the political atmosphere, but it's also other things. It's like, I think we all feel the environment crumbling around us, and we're all suffering from the pandemic, and there's just so many different stressors and anxieties in our life that maybe they did all mess up and make horror be on the rise right now. But I don't know. I agree that horror is big, and it has been for 2 or 3 years at least, maybe 4 or 5. But I worry about times of boom, because they're followed by bust, and
Yeah,
I don't want to see that. I don't want to see the cliff coming. I just want us to stay where we are and be pretty happy.
I don't think it's coming. I'm optimistic.
Yeah.
The phrase that horror is having a moment always implies that it's going to end.
The moment.
Yeah, I want to, if I could add one thing. I think everything Stephen said is true. It's funny. I had another conversation just about this today. And, I don't know if I sometimes feel like the political part of it gets a little bit overstated. Well, even not the political part, but the idea that like in bad times, like horror thrives. Like when are not bad times? I don't know about you. Well, it's always bad times for somebody, or large swaths of somebody. Like the thing that made me insane besides the pandemic, but in those first 2 months, like we were getting car commercials and bread commercials. Like in these uncertain times, you really need Wonder Loaf, Like, the horror writers are like, no, it's always been uncertain times. But I think, that said, like, obviously we get to sort of react to the horrors that are going around us in interesting ways. But I do think, there's something to, us writers here in this room are all within about 10 to 15 years of each other. And most of the writers that were brought up, and even, Jordan Peele that you mentioned as a filmmaker, all these people are of age that grew up with sort of the boom, that grew up with Stephen King, that grew up with all the 80s horror movies. Now all these people are the age at typically where the creators, I guess, are old enough or are allowed to be published. I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, but like you've got all these people that grew up with King and 80s horror, and even leaking into 90s horror. Now they're the ones making it. And I think what's part of what makes it so exciting is that all these people, that includes editors and publishers and readers, don't have the stigma that used to be, really barnacled to horror. And I think that allows, it's allowing us to do more, I don't say more like the writers weren't good enough back then, but we're allowed more freedom to mix genres, to mix maybe, literary fiction and horror, or science fiction and horror, et cetera. And I think we're seeing that echo of maybe the first sort of horror boom in the people that sort of consumed it are now getting to make it, and they don't feel guilty for making it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I worry. I think you're right about horror is not as much of an outsider as it used to be, and that I like that, of course, but it also concerns me because I feel like being an outsider or being not accepted by, the mainstream has always been part of horror's identity. Like we're going to be surly out here by the fence and we're going to glare at you when you walk past, I think that's always been like a point of pride with horror people. And so now that we're in the party, I wonder, how can we mess it up? What are we going to do to I don't know if we mess the party up or we mess the party up for us. I don't know what's going to happen.
I don't know. I don't think either. I think it's if you just go by sales alone. I mean, I'm looking at our store. We actually had to integrate a horror section into our store. So, it's selling so well that people are searching for it, seeking it out. Which, I mean, as a kid, I always did in my local bookstores. I was, you'd find that it was always in the corner of the horror section, and it was always predominantly those zebra paperbacks with fruit with a knife in it or something, and you would be like, oh, that I need to read it. Skeletons and zebra paperbacks, and but it was I don't know, that was my little place to go as an outsider in small town America. Do you think it's important for bookstores to have their own horror section, or do you think integrating it within the others? Or
I like a horror section.
I'm kind of torn on that. Well, kind of so if we get to the cliff that Stephen mentioned, I'm going to call it Stephen's Cliff. Right? I mean, part of me worries, how do we hook sort of the unsuspecting, I didn't necessarily mind that, for some bookstores where if it was just all put in with general fiction and I would say not necessarily lumped in with fantasy and science fiction, et cetera. But I don't know, that was kind of cool. Maybe if your cover wasn't so obviously horror, I feel like you could sneak horror. And now I think, maybe the readers who, might not be able to be fooled into trying it. I don't know. That's my only little worry. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, please, horror, keep selling.
Yeah.
Let's have a big horror section.
Yeah, I think if we can all be in staff picks and end caps, that's the best place to be,
Does happen here. They'll all vouch for it. I don't know about other stores. So let me go switch gears a little bit here. And one thing that I found super interesting, all three books here, location is so important in real estate, and so is it in horror fiction. Isolating people is nigh impossible nowadays. It's just so hard to, if you look at every single piece of horror fiction from the 60s to the 90s, and into the 2000s, early 2000s, it's the whole point was get a group isolated and have the bad thing happen. And so what do we do now as authors to ramp it up? And what did you do in this book to really affect it? We'll start with Rachel on this one.
Well, I'm just laughing because I lived in New York City for all my 20s. So for me, I was I'm going to send them upstate. Live in the city, anywhere upstate, that's you just picture just woods. So I'm I know what's going to be scary. They're going to go upstate on the Metro North to the great unknown. No, I don't live in the city anymore. Now I'm in Western New York, but I'm just laughing at myself because it's my idea of I'm going to send them to the middle of nowhere where no one can hear them scream.
It's a lot more spiders probably out there in the small towns and in New York City as well.
So, in my imagination, yes.
I bet there's a lot more human spiders in the city, though, man.
Yes.
That's true.
And we won't go into the rat issue. How about you, Paul? What did this one? It's right in your backyard, basically. So
yeah, no, I was just saying I get lazy with setting, but I don't know. I also like using New England because there are so many sets of expectations, right? You can lean into them or you can sort of undercut them. But as far as I don't know, I've never been afraid. I mean, I will freely admit with The Cabin at the End of the World, I stuck them in the northern tip of New Hampshire, purposefully off the grid, so I could have a home invasion story with no cell phones. But in my other books, I don't shy away from technology at all. I think there's so many wonderful opportunities. I mean, just even now, think about how much I would freak out if my GPS stopped working on my phone, or even today, I was complaining to you guys earlier, not that you cared. No, sure you have, that my voice memo thing stopped working, and how much of a tailspin that put my day into. I mean, there's yeah, technology breaks. The world's an imperfect place. Use it all.
Okay, Stephen, and yours was so you're where
Yeah,
it's
8,000 feet up the mountain in Idaho. So, but they have cells. The protagonist, Jade Daniel, she has the cell phone.
yeah.
The trick is, there's other ways to isolate people than technology. You can, like, Jade is isolated by the fact that she's the girl who cried wolf too many times, so nobody believes her, and they all kind of dismiss her anyways because she is the horror chick, as she calls herself, and she's always pulling horror pranks. So nobody takes her seriously. So you can be right in the middle of everybody in town and still be isolated.
Okay. So we're going to then talk about not just ourselves and our own books, but besides the three authors here, and everyone should buy all of their books from us, and we will get your signatures, your book signed book plates, and Paul Tremblay has the signed books ready for us. So besides us, who should people be reading right now? Who would you recommend? And we'll start this time with Stephen.
Oh, Haley Piper. I think Haley Piper is writing really killer stuff. Really, it's disconcerting, but there's real emotion there. It's just everything you look for in a story, I think.
Okay. Paul, anybody high on the list?
Well, I'm going to briefly cheat really quickly just to say that Stephen's book is excellent, and I haven't read Cappy yet, but Rachel's The Return is so much fun.
It was, yes.
I recommend that as well.
Yeah.
So just this week, Tor.com always puts out amazing novellas. They put out a couple of Stevens, obviously, but Cassandra Cause, Nothing But Black and Teeth, is a modern sort of reimagining of not quite The Haunting of Hill House, but very terrifying and intense haunted house story set in Japan. And also, really briefly, two of my favorite novels from new writers this year. One is Gus Moreno's The Thing Between Us. Man, that thing really got under my skin. Yeah, I was going along at the beginning, and then there was a certain point, it's like, oh man, this book is really terrifying. And it's about grief, but that just totally messes with your head. And more sort of like a book that mixes sort of like fantasy and Vietnamese ghost stories and literary fiction. I just love this book. It was called Build Your House Around My Body by Violet Cooper-Smith. Wonderful, wonderful book. I kind of wish your publisher had sort of leaned into some of the horror aspects a little bit more. So more of us, as we talked about, more of us weirdos would have flocked to that book. But yeah, man, that book was something else.
That's been my go-to recommendation. I love that book. And I'm currently almost done with When the Reckoning Comes by LaTanya McQueen. And I really, really recommend that book. It's eerie and stunning and scary, and it's just, I love it. So if people out there haven't read it yet, definitely get that one on your list.
Okay. My go-to besides you guys, because that always comes first, but next would be probably Catriona Ward's The House on Needless Street, which really messed with my head like something terrible, where I spent like half the book going, I have no clue what's going on with this book. You have a man in a house who's losing time, a young girl whose legs have been broken so she can't leave the house, a missing child, and a lesbian cat. And I just couldn't figure out what the heck anything was going on here. But once you start figuring out what it is, it's like incredibly sad and incredibly disturbing. It really bothered me. So, and the one that Paul recommended too, the Gus Moreno, is just, that one really got under my skin as well this year. So any classics that are your go-to classics that are must-read classics? Or
The Girl Next Door, Jack Ketchum. That's always good for like whenever I reread that book, I realize that all I'm doing with my horror fiction is kittens and rainbows,
I don't know about the last 50 pages of I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know if that's true, Stephen. I don't know. I mentioned Shirley Jackson. So for me, Haunting of Hill House, or We've Always Lived in the Castle. And not that he needs more sales, but man, I've tried, because I walk my dog, so I try to squeeze in some books that way. So I've been rereading some of King's by audiobook. And I totally have to reevaluate Revival. Like when I first read it, I was like, oh, I'm not sure. But when I listened to it the second time, I was like, oh, I totally get this. It's one of his darker, better books. I don't know if that counts as a classic, but I guess it counts as the classic.
It's about 10 years ahead of its time, though, too. I feel like
yeah, for sure.
If it would come out 10 years later, everyone would have been like, oh, yeah, this is, Midnight Mass is, some of the ideas are similar. So, and Rachel?
I'm also a Hill House. Shirley Jackson is my number one. So that would be my favorite horror book of all time that I would keep coming back to.
Okay. Has the best first sentence, I think, ever. So it's just a perfect first sentence. So we're going to flip gears just a little bit and go into Halloween. Everyone's favorite holiday. Definitely mine. Do you guys have any traditions that you go through every year for Halloween, or anything you do every year, or a new tradition you're trying this year?
What I've been doing for a few years is I always watch. I don't know if y'all know Monk. I used to love Monk. I still love Monk, the television show, the USA show. But
Tony Shalhoub.
Yeah. Season 4.
He makes everything better.
Yeah, he does. Season 4, episode 2 is Mr. Monk Goes Home. I think that's what it's called. And it's set on Halloween night. And so everybody's trick-or-treating. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful. I just watched it 2 nights ago. I do it every Halloween. And it's just such a good, tight Halloween story. But it's also, I didn't realize it until last night, it's a really touching kind of father, son, and brother story. It's got everything, I think. I'll try to watch that. I mean, of course, I watch all the slashers I love and live by, but I always make sure to fit Monk in there.
Give us your top 10 slashers real quick.
Top 10. Scream, Halloween, Happy Death Day. It Follows, The Final Girls. I think it Final Girls would go just before It Follows, actually. Then Cabin in the Woods. That's 6. I'm going to say Friday the 13th. No, I'm going to say Nightmare on Elm Street next. And then Friday the 13th, part 7. And then Friday the 13th, part 2. I said Scream first, right? Okay. I'm sure I did that. And how about I land on, for number 10, Freaky. I like Freaky.
Okay. Fun. All right. Paul, any traditions?
So lame. Not really. I mean, it used to be like when my kids were younger for trick-or-treating. I mean, that was the big one. With a neighbor, went from like pulling our kids in a wagon to, maybe 10 years later, the wagon having some beers in it. And the kids are ahead of us, not paying attention to us. I kind of missed that. The kids dressing up. It was always fun to see what their costume would be. Otherwise, it's me trying to squeeze in movies when I can. I will say this. I do make a tradition of either on Halloween or around Halloween. In my math classes, I'll read something that I've written to try to freak them out a little bit. So I guess that's my tradition.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, Rachel.
It's always an obscene amount of Halloween candy. Like, I can eat a truly disgusting amount of Halloween candy. Like, it's shameful. I'm rotting my insides, but
they're fun size. It doesn't count. They're fun.
It's getting pricey. It's like $15 a bag now, so I don't know if I can hang. But I usually watch The Orphanage every year, which is my favorite horror movie. And then I've been asked this question on a few panels, and then it occurred to me much later. I was like, oh, I watch The Twilight Zone every year. I'll watch a bunch of episodes of The Twilight Zone. That's my favorite show, and I always they used to have, they probably still have the marathons on New Year's Eve and 4th of July, but I added Halloween to my my marathoning of Twilight Zone. So I'll just pick a random season and start somewhere.
Wow.
Nice.
We always watch horror movies on that night, but I mean, this is me, so I watch a lot of horror movies anyway, and my husband suffers from it, but is patient. But I'm trying to do 50 this month, and we'll see if we hit it or not. I don't know. It's a lot. But I've got friends who are I'm at 79, and I'm going, how did you watch 79 movies? It's only been 25 days.
That's a commitment. They're hardcore.
They must be. I mean, I mean, I thought, 50 was crazy and insane. And
They're just walking around watching on their phone, like, if they're at work, they go to the bathroom, they're watching, squeezing in.
maybe their jobs are a lot easier. I don't know. But yeah, so it seems like every night I try to watch one or two, which is keeping me going a little ahead of the curve. But I know 5 days to do 11 more. I don't know.
You can do it.
Well, we've done a Sunday, so Saturday, Sunday. If you really sit yourself down,
yeah,
you can do it.
Those are days off work when, you do things homework. So
Listen, you committed to this 50 movies. You set yourself up. You gotta follow.
And the other half is like, come on, what are you doing? No. But it's I don't know. It's super fun. I love horror movies. If you saw my basement, you would freak out because I have I'm probably up to about 4,000 Blu-rays and DVDs now, just up the walls all the way around up to the bar in the basement. So it's either a bar you're looking at or movies and TV.
Nice.
So
Nice.
it's a lot. It's crazy. The books are all upstairs. So, but it's one of those things. It's like, I love, we try to watch Lady in White every Halloween, which is one of my favorite Halloween movies and ghost stories. And it's just, it's actually kind of charming. It's not really that scary, but it's so Halloween-y that I don't know. It's like the most Halloween-y movie out there that's not got the word Halloween in the title someplace. I don't know. You guys have special Halloween movies for the night, or you switch it off?
I switch it off. Yeah, it's different things every year.
Yeah, I used to try to watch The Thing or maybe the original Night of the Living Dead, but lately, in the most recent years, it's just been whatever I can. Yeah, usually newer stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've committed to The Orphanage. That's my.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, that's my.
That's a good one.
I like my routines. So sometimes I'll, because it's on a weekend, I'll probably squeeze in a movie, one I haven't seen before. But yeah, for me, that's my ultimate. And it's kind of like a treat. I get to watch it once a year.
Okay. All righty. So are you doing anything this year for Halloween that's different? Anybody?
I'm flying home. I'm on an airplane for most of the day, but I hope to get here in time for trick or treating. That's my big plan because I want to dress up because our front yard, we have one of those 12-foot skeletons, and we've got all these animatronic things that jump at you and all kinds of stuff for the kids, So I'll be in costume, hopefully handing out candy. If trick-or-treaters come, who knows if they come on COVID times,
Do you get a lot pre-pandemic? Did you get a lot of trick-or-treaters in your neighborhood?
I just moved here. I moved here during the pandemic, so I don't even know.
Okay.
Don't know what's normal. Yeah.
We moved, and in Cincinnati, we would get 17. It was like we'd eat all the candy. And here, the first year, I bought 5 pounds, and it was gone in less than half an hour. Wow. And so now we're up to buying 12 pounds of candy and hoping it lasts for the 2 hours. It's insane.
Yeah.
Rhode Islanders, man, they take Halloween serious. It's like they're all Emily Danforth. It is all about the Halloween and the.
Well, it's such a small state. I think it's everyone in Halloween just comes to your neighborhood. I mean, everyone in Rhode Island comes to your neighborhood.
It must be, or they're just very hungry. I don't know. We are getting some interesting questions in here too. So I would say let's move to a few of those. We have to talk about your favorite Halloween costume that you've ever worn. What was the best Halloween costume you've ever worn in your life? And by her face, we're going to Rachel first. Because you're like,
I can't remember. My life is a blur. I don't know what's happened. I don't know what I was wearing yesterday. I can't remember. I've kind of copped out the past few years because I don't. It just seems like a lot of energy. I guess when I was this is relevant to Cackle. I wrote Cackle, and there's spiders and witches, and then a picture surfaced of me as a small child dressed up in I remember the costume. It was a plastic bag costume called Spiderella, and it's like a witch spider costume with bell sleeves. And there's pictures of me descending the steps dramatically when I was a child. So I guess maybe that one, because that's the only, like, people ask me, like, what's the origin for Cackle? And I'm like, oh, but maybe it's that, like, memories in my subconscious of being in that costume. So I guess I'll go with that.
Works. Paul, any
Good one.
special ones?
Oh, yeah, I'm not great at it. I mean, when I was in my like mid to late 20s, we used to go into Salem, where Halloween there was just nuts. And we went as like the Wizard of Oz, and I was the Scarecrow, and people threatened to burn me, which wasn't cool. But I hit on some random people's like porches too, and jumped down and scared them, so that was kind of fun. I think the one that secretly thrilled me the most was so like lame in terms of like preparation, but I saw Adam Cesar. Am I saying his name right?
I think so.
Yeah, the guy wrote Corn and Clownfield. I saw he posted a picture, like his 2-minute costume was Quint. It's like, oh, wait a minute. I've got a green jacket. I've got the hat. I've got a denim shirt. So I I went out and bought Narragansett, because that's the area of the country that I live in. So I was Quint. I even shaved the beard, which is the last time I've shaved this. My only regret was I didn't think of it earlier, because I could have really grown out sort of like the lamb chops. It really wouldn't have helped with my chin, though. My chin is still like non-existent, so I wouldn't have been able to grow a chin. But I think that costume secretly thrilled me the most.
That's a good one.
Wow. I think I misheard you, Paul, when you were talking about Adam. I thought you said Corn in a Clown Field, and I think that'd be a wonderful sequel for him.
The sequel.
Yeah, Corn in a Clown Field.
I know he's doing a sequel, but I think Corn in a Clown Field should be the title.
Yeah,
It's a lot of clowns.
I just pulled up a picture of me in a costume. Can I share a screen?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, if you hover over your video, you should see a little laptop icon with a arrow in the middle. I'm the voice of God right now.
I'm having to do some security stuff here, which is really fun.
While he's doing that, I will say I got some nice response to my dressed up as Father Paul Hill from Midnight Mass this weekend.
Oh,
that was a very simple costume. I got a cardigan, a black shirt.
Oh, nice.
Jeans. Yeah. So that went well.
I can't have to redo my security. I have to restart Chrome, and that'll mess everything up. So I won't do it. My favorite costume that I've done, probably about 10 years ago, I was a zombie cheerleader, and so I had to go on eBay and find a cheerleading outfit that would fit me, and that was fun. And I don't think it fit terribly well, actually.
Days of Jack Ketchum as well. There, the girl next door.
Yeah, but I was on campus. I teach here on the university, and I noticed there was a costume contest, and I figured, heck, I'm dressed up, so I strolled on in there and got in the queue of you have to go up on stage and like perform for 3 minutes, which I'm not really a performer, but I committed it enough that I jumped up and came down in like the front and back splits, whatever. I don't know what splits are called. It's not the sideways splits, it's a front and back splits, but and it hurt terribly. But I won the contest. I won all these, like I got all this swag and money and stuff. And but I had to wrap my thigh for like 6 weeks after.
A straddle.
Is that it?
Straddle. Wow.
I hope the picture you're trying to pull up was you in the straddle.
No, I don't think anybody captured it, man. I think everybody just groaned.
I can still remember I was in like the 4th grade, and my parents made me into a television set, and I loved like the kaiju movies so much, and so I had puppets inside the TV set, so I would be the face of the newscaster, and then there was a little pull down thing, and the puppets could attack each other, and then the pull down thing would go up, and I would report on what was going on. So
that's so sweet.
It was
that is good.
It did not look anything like a TV. It looked like a box with some weird metal coming out the top, but it was to a kid it was totally a TV, and it was great. So we're getting some really good questions actually now, so I'd love to know this too. So how much did writing short stories help with developing your writing? Did you start with short stories and then have a goal of going to novels, or have you? Anybody on this?
Let's jump in first. I guess I would just say really briefly, I did start off almost exclusively writing short stories. It's kind of how I learned how to write. And really probably did that for, I don't know, a good 5 to maybe even like 8 years before I even tried a novel. But But again, like writing a novel, I had to remind myself, is like, well, I just didn't start writing short stories that were any good. Even then, I probably wasn't writing very many short stories that were good. It's a whole new process. And it's weird now, like I have a harder time going back to short fiction compared to novels. So I shouldn't say harder time, but my short stories are getting longer. They used to be really short. I kind of miss the days where I could write like the 2,000, 3,000 word short story. And that just doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, I've been trying to train myself to write like 1,500 and 2,000 words horror stories again, because you're right. It's easy to make them be 8,000 or 10,000 words, but once you get that far, you're like, heck, I'll just turn this into a novel. It's already so close. But I think I came up through like writing programs, and I think we kind of inherited from James Joyce the idea that you practice with Dubliners with your short story collection, then you do your life's work with Ulysses, with a big novel. So we kind of are trained or conditioned that it's a hierarchy or a ladder or something like that. But I don't think that's the case. I think there's some people who are just born short story writers, and it's not about they're practicing to write a novel. It's just they like to write short stories. And there's some people who hardly write any short stories ever. They're novelists, right. And it's a difference in sprinters and marathon runners, really. Some people are cut for one, some are cut for another. But yeah, I did come up writing a lot of stories. When I wrote my first novel, I felt like I was 12 years old at the motel with my dad, and he was pushing me in the deep end and saying swim, and it was either swim or drown. That's how it was with my first novel.
I also started off writing short stories. I still write short stories. Usually if I'm like waiting, if I like submit a novel and I'm waiting to hear back on something in that anxious time, what I'll do is I'll write short fiction, or if I'm waiting for my book to come out and I don't have something I'm working on, I'll write a short story. And I kind of like to go back and forth between both, but I do notice the word count creep where I used to be able to write some like a 2,000 to 3,000 word short, and now it's like 7,000 and beyond. But I love short fiction. I think I'll always write short fiction, but I don't think that there's you have to write short fiction before you write novels, or you whatever medium you enjoy the most. I think that's what you should go for, or however many words you need to use to tell the story you want to tell. Not worry so much about form, because I do see like novellas are getting bigger, and so I think there's going to be more room to not have to fit into a certain word count box in the future.
Tor's doing some amazing things with novellas right now, and it's just like, thank you. So I know a lot of authors who feel like the novella is the perfect length for a horror story, but I'm kind of with you. It depends on the story. I mean, you're not going to do The Stand as a novella, but Cassandra Claw's new book, of course, is like perfect for a novella. It's a one night in a haunted house, so it's perfect for 100 pages, and I love that.
Yeah, I think of novellas is analogous to a feature film, whereas a novel feels more like a season of television.
Yeah. It didn't used to be that way, though. I mean,
it didn't.
They used to try to cram it in there, and here's a 2-hour movie based on a 500-page book. Dune's a good example, or something, or the stuff that Mike Flanagan's doing for Netflix and spreading it out over 7 or 8 episodes is amazing. And it feels scarier for some reason when it's spread out like that than when I don't know what it is. If it's just the tension goes longer, or are we binging 4 hours at a time and it's 2 movies in a row, basically? I don't know. Does anyone, speaking of movies, does anybody have anything in pre-production or any options out there? Any that they can do news of that they're allowed to say?
Can't say.
Yeah, I mean, I can say like Camp at the End of the World, Head Full of Ghosts, and Survivor Song are all under option, all in various degrees. Well, I'd say one's getting very close, though, knock on wood, to being a thing, maybe in the spring.
That was my hardest thing, to get an option on a book and then like have it go so far and then just collapse completely. because of Benicio del Toro, but it was all his fault.
That guy.
That was depressing. But Rachel, any plans on anything for yours, or that you can say? Can't
There's
say.
an option on the return for TV. If anything will happen, I don't know. I'm kind of want something to happen just to see the set. Not for my career, just to see the set.
Yeah.
But it'd be cool if something happened. But yeah, you know, the TV film production end of things, it's either takes 10 years or who knows.
Yeah, you're right. That set for the return would be like all those different rooms that are different, like environments, kind of.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So somebody actually asked, and we asked this earlier, but we're going to re-ask it again with the audience here. So Stephen, any opinions on the Antlers movie that's coming out?
I don't know. It's got a good jump scare in it. I can say that.
No, that's it. Okay. Because somebody said parts of it reminded them very much, at least in the trailers, of The Only Good Indians and scenes like that. And is there a connection? Did you see a connection? Is it totally different?
Yeah, I think
did they rip you off
totally
completely?
different? No way a rip off. No, I wouldn't. I mean, yeah, it's something with antlers, but I mean, Elf Dead Woman in Good Indians doesn't have antlers, so
Right.
she gets drawn that way all the time. But she's a cow elk, not a bull, you know.
So let's see here. Another good question here we have is, what is everyone currently working on? So what can we expect next, or anticipate next is probably the best way to put that, because we're all excited for the next one. Let's start with Rachel.
So I'm in the process of editing my third book, which is called Such Sharp Teeth. It's a lady werewolf book.
Yay!
Should be out
Nice.
next October if I can
Nice.
get my stuff together. So
Nice.
Werewolves was my favorite. My first novel was Werewolf.
Mhm.
So
it's kind of like an adult Ginger Snaps.
Nice.
we just watched that. That was one of the 39.
Yeah.
It's great. Yeah.
Oh, that's one of the best ones.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. My favorite werewolf. My favorite werewolf movie.
You don't want to know more. It's embarrassing. Paul?
So I just actually yesterday turned in my copy edits for the Paul Bearers Club, which will be out July 5th, 2022. Yeah, it's sort of an odd book. I'm excited for it though. It's presented as like a faux memoir of a person, you know, who bears no resemblance to me, I assure you, or all resemblance to me. But anyway, he calls himself Art Barbara. And in 1988-89, as a loser senior, he starts a Paul Bearers Club, which is where you volunteer at local funeral homes to serve elderly or homeless that don't have any living relatives, which is kind of sweet, but also, I don't know, still dead people. It's kind of morbid, or has the chance for morbid. A strange older woman joins the club, and she becomes sort of like this maybe or maybe not supernatural figure that looms throughout the rest of his life. And hopefully the fun part is that she comments. Not only does she comment at the end of every chapter, but as you go deeper into the book, she starts like crossing out words and making comments in the margins and stuff like that.
Wow.
Nice.
Yeah.
Stephen?
I'm right now in the middle of notes or edits on the sequel to My Heart is a Chainsaw, Don't Fear the Reaper. So that's coming out the same month as Paul Bearers Club, July. I think I'm through July 26th, maybe somewhere up there.
Are we still following Jade in this one?
Yep.
Ooh, okay.
Is Blue Oyster Cult going to blurb the book?
That's what I'm hoping for. Yeah. Either that or Will Ferrell. Something about
Yeah,
cowbell.
they're enough cowbell.
That would be awesome.
I got to say to Stephen, the last paragraphs of that book just ripped my heart off and stomped on it 7,000 times.
Thank you.
It's like, it's such a good book until that point, and then it's like a great book. So it just killed me. So
Thank you.
just to let
You know that ending was not there originally until my editor Joe Monte gave me a list of things I can't do at the end of Chainsaw, and I was like, this is stupid, you know.
that you can't do.
Yeah, and because I was just like slaughtering everybody. It was ridiculous. And Paul, you read some of that copy, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Where it was kind of grim and not happy. And, I'm not saying it's super happy now, but like, just to prove him wrong, I opened up a side file to prove that this was a stupid idea, and it turned out to work, you know. So I guess the moral there is, your editor's not trying to ruin your book. Your editor's trying to make your book better. And what I always want to call literary integrity is actually just stubbornness or fear, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay. And I do want to mention, too, because we're talking about horror, just for next month, right now is still horror. We're all reading our horror for Halloween, and we all read horror year-round. We're not going to stop. But Noirvember is in
okay.
this month. It's Noirvember, and we have signed copies of Paul's two noir novels that you need to read if you've never read them. They've just been republished in paperback, so we've got them at the store. And Paul, do you want to tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, baby Paul wrote those, or
Maybe?
almost middle-aged Paul. Yeah, so The Little Sleep features a narcoleptic Lithuanian private detective in South Boston. Yeah. They're hopefully, somewhat darkly humorous. I do think, now, like, in retrospect, like, that was me for the first time, like, fooling around with a thing that I've noticed I've become obsessed with is, like, the idea of identity and, like, who you are and stuff like that. And that's definitely in play in The Little Sleep. But, Mark's not a very good detective. Like, his mom owns the building. It's really just to keep him busy because his narcolepsy is pretty severe, pretty serious. The first book I would say is a riff on The Big Sleep. And I don't know. It's funny. The second book, eventually, especially, I always have like no memory of the plot. Like, I can't tell you what I wrote. That's just how bad my memory is for books. I can tell you how they make me feel. But I would say the first book, your introduction to Mark, opens up with sort of a stereotypical PI, big city PI chapter where a beautiful woman walks into the PI's office, except she holds up her hand and there are bandages around the bases of her fingers. And she says, someone stole my fingers and replaced them with someone else's fingers. And of course, and then Mark wakes up and he realizes, someone was here. They left like a file with some photos, but he, half the book is him trying to figure out what his case is, never mind trying to solve it.
Nice.
Much of the same in the second book. Yeah, I don't know, like the series thing, Stephen. Yeah, you're going to be awesome with it, but that like totally messed with my head, like the idea of writing a series. Because when I sold The Little Sleep, I told my agent, I didn't know anything. I was like, hey, this is the only book of him I'm going to write because I don't have any other stories. And he's like, okay, but we sold 2 books and you have to write a second story. I'm like, oh, okay. Anyway.
No, they're good. Right. I read them both. Yeah, they're good.
Thank you.
And you don't fall asleep while reading them either, so it's nice.
No.
I hope not.
All righty, so we're about out of time, so we're here with our final and very important question that I want to pose to everybody. Candy corn, is it a delicious treat or is it a satanic earwax created to spoil all of our holiday? Anyway. Both. Can't be both.
I'll eat it and I'll be like, I hate every second of this, but I cannot stop. I feel sick. I want to die, but I'll keep eating it.
Wow.
I'm not going to say
you
no.
do have a candy
I'll see
thing,
it and say that is disgusting. I should not touch that. But I will. I could eat a whole thing of it, and then I'll feel like, why do I feel terrible?
I can't eat it. It's one of the only things kind of candies. That and circus peanuts just make me want to scream. I can't do either one of those.
I mean, it's not as bad as black. I mean, I can't do like black licorice or like Mike and Ike's. I mean, I like Twizzlers, red licorice. I like that stuff. But Yeah, I don't eat candy corn anymore. I mean, I think I used to try to force it down. And I'm like, why am I doing this to myself?
Yeah, I haven't eaten candy corn for many years. I don't remember hating it, but like Rachel, I think I would eat it and not be totally thrilled that I had eaten it. Circus peanuts. If I'm understanding what a circus peanut is, I think they kind of gross me out too. But they don't gross me out because of taste or anything. It's some of them have like 2 peanuts and some of them have 3, and I always feel like, what is going on here? I don't understand why there would be a difference. That just blows my mind and leaves me just sitting there. I don't know what to do. Yeah.
It happens in nature, I guess.
that harvest that year has weird circus peanuts. They're harvested by Adam. They're harvested by Adam's clowns, and I'm looking forward to his new novel, Candy Corn in the Clown Field.
He did this actually last year. He was on this panel last year. So.
Nice.
His ears must be ringing.
Yeah, he won't care. All right. I really want to thank everyone for coming and out and listening to us and asking the great questions. And I really, really want to thank our panel. So I'm so excited. Oh, there she is with the books right there.
I just want to shout out Danielle, who won a costume contest dressed as an avocado.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Wow.
But I want everyone to rush out and buy these books, hopefully from us. You can order them right here if you click the little green bar. It's right down. And there's other books. They're all listed there. So we have all the books that we have in stock right now. So grab the new one, grab the backlist, and everyone have a really happy and scary Halloween.
Hi, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you so much.
Bye.
Bye.